Welcome to The Beat. I'm Ari Melber, and we are tracking this breaking news. President Trump losing again in court on this issue that has been roiling the Trump administration, its relationship with the judiciary, and the showdown with the Supreme Court. The news here: an appeals court rebuking President Trump and denying its bid to end migrants' legal status while this appeal is underway. This involves Venezuelan migrants, despite a string of court losses in these immigration and deportation issues. The Trump administration continues to press on many ways with its agenda, and at times in apparent defiance of these court orders, which, as we've reported, could put pressure on the Supreme Court to act again. They're preparing reportedly to deport even more migrants under the wartime powers that they've seized, the Alien Enemies Act. Politico reports migrants were actually loaded onto buses today, this afternoon, and there were buses seen arriving at an ICE detention facility. You see it there on the zoom in. So even amidst these court rulings against Trump, there are signs that they may be pressing on. And so that brings us here on this Friday night to an ACLU emergency motion. We've reported on how these different cases work and how the pressure sometimes does push back on the administration. Indeed, Donald Trump himself softening some of his language, if not his actions yet, in this area. So this new request, the breaking news I'm telling you about, is seeking an immediate emergency hearing and ruling on what you just saw, whether what they believe to be buses full of these individuals set for deportation should not be hurried out of the country as others have been, and instead given at least a month notice for the due process rights, which of course matter for any human in the United States, whether you are an American citizen who might think this won't happen to you, but it could, or whether you are a legal resident accused of something else, or in some cases, the undocumented and others who might be legally removed. I'm going to read from this new Friday night filing. Plaintiffs, this is the folks affected by this who are being advocated for by the ACLU, learned that the Trump administration has, quote, been giving notices of removal in class members in English only, which don't say how much time they have to contest their removal or even how to do so. In other words, the allegation being not the real due process, which the Supreme Court just said is required and, frankly, is a long-standing precedent. The filing I'm reading to you that's breaking news goes on to say that officers last night told class members, that's just a reference to the affected parties here, these individuals, that they'll be removed within a day. And that expires as early as this afternoon. And upon information and belief, individuals have already been loaded onto buses. Again, that legal terminology there on information and belief is, in an emergency context, they might not have all the evidence or all the pictures and videos, but the lawyers are saying, we think this is happening. And they're asking this judge to say no. And that's against a backdrop where there is evidence and allegations that the Trump administration has already defied this and other judges in these related cases. So this emergency hearing is being held in this hour. Sometimes our breaking news is something happening this moment. Sometimes it's something that's been happening over the course of the afternoon. In this case, part of this breaking story has happened. We have the information, the reporting from Politico on the buses, and part of this breaking news, quite frankly, begins in about 12 minutes. It is going to happen in this emergency hearing. The stakes are high. The pressure is on because the administration is all but clearly seeking a confrontation on these issues. That's why the Attorney General didn't say, as we reported, she didn't say, well, we'll see what we can do or we'll give it time. She said after the Supreme Court asked for the facilitation of the return of Garcia in that other case, she just said he's not coming back. Also breaking news tonight, the ACLU is asking the Supreme Court to block the imminent deportations under these wartime powers. Meanwhile, there are further pieces of evidence. It's not conclusive because we haven't had a full due process hearings, but evidence that cuts against the administration's claims. For example, intelligence suggesting there isn't coordination between the gang here that has been alleged to be the invasion in some of these cases, Tren de Aragua, and the Venezuelan government. Now, that is an alleged link that was discussed as the legal claimed basis for the wartime powers. In other words, the Trump administration said, hey, we think this is a gang working with a country. We're treating it as a wartime invasion. Now, the factual predicate for that is potentially crumbling before our eyes, at least according to this U.S. intelligence assessment as reported by the Associated Press. On the other hand, I can tell you the Trump administration in court continues to insist that they have these powers and they believe they'll be vindicated once it's fully argued before the Supreme Court. The tensions are high. The Trump administration continues, as I mentioned, to use the Garcia case to show the Supreme Court who they think is boss, that they think they can get away with this. Now, this may not be the issue that the Trump administration initially thought. Indeed, if you wanted to test wartime powers, you might want to test them in a case where, and these cases do exist, by the way, where there are individuals who have been proven to be violent or dangerous, or who have voluminous criminal records in one or more countries. And yet, this is a case where they literally sent Garcia to the wrong foreign prison. The Maryland father has now become a subject of both national and international intrigue, and people appear to care. There have been days of protests in different parts of the country. Some people saying this is all about human rights, they care about him. Others making the broader point that we've seen judges, including Republican-appointed judges, make, that even if more negative information were to come out about this individual, even if he were moved to some other country other than the U.S., without due process, no one is safe. Now, we've talked about what the Democrats can do. They don't control foreign policy out of the Congress. They have oversight. But when it comes to certain foreign policy and immigration powers, it's up to the president, even when the president is clashing with the courts about how far they can go. But that doesn't mean, through the oversight power I mentioned, that the Democrats have nothing to do or say. And so rather than just holding a hearing or issuing statements, we've seen a different type of engagement and leadership from one Democratic senator, Chris Van Hollen, who went down there not knowing whether he could meet with Garcia, who's up against basically two governments, the executive branch of the United States and El Salvador. But here from Senator Van Hollen's office, you see the photo they've released. They sent out this photo of the meeting they got only because the senator pushed on against the nose and against, basically, like I said, two governments, to at least check on the well-being of an individual who the Trump administration admits they mistakenly sent to this prison and who Senator Van Hollen counts as a constituent, which is still meaningful in the United States system of democracy and government. Van Hollen has just returned to the United States, as you may have heard this afternoon, and after this shuttle diplomacy, he spoke out to journalists.
He was traumatized by being at CCOT. His conversation with me was the first communication he'd had with anybody outside a prison since he was abducted. If you deny the constitutional rights of one man, you threaten the constitutional rights and due process for everyone else.
Fact check, true. Some people are familiar with the term due process, that the American system, for all of its foibles and sometimes shortcomings, actually historically has led the way as compared to a lot of other countries in the world about affording that due process. It literally dates all the way to the founding of this country and the revolutionary principles that fought against tyranny in kingdoms that would just snatch people up. And so, again, we've reported on all kinds of ways that the American justice system falters and is not always equal to everybody. But that baseline is vital. And the Trump administration is rolling it back and seeing how far they can get away with it. First on these immigrant cases, but also, and we have more on this tonight, in cases that will affect other people, people who are here legally, people who are citizens. You have a line and you hold it or you let them break it. That's what this is about, as you heard the senators say, and Justice Sotomayor, in her statement in that ruling last week, made the same point. Then you have what the administration's doing. And there is something really critical developing here, even as they are on record trying to defy. And we have reported that from the start. Indeed, the day the ruling came down, we reported on the evidence and the past practices that would suggest there might be bad faith or dishonesty in the administration's response. At the same time, pressure works. A Democrat standing up beyond just a press conference and going down to El Salvador worked to check on this individual. The international pressure is on. And the Trump administration has a lot of different battles that they are struggling in, from the economy to the courts. And so while we know Donald Trump is accountable, he is literally the president, these are his policies, he could stand up any day and say, bring this individual back. So we know that he's pushing it. But we're also seeing cracks from the pressure because this president, who is responsible for these policies, also seems aware that he may have to back down, as he did with tariffs, that he may have to retreat, that the Supreme Court may push him farther than that initial facilitate ruling. And so I want you to notice how both things can be true. He is responsible, and no honest reporter can observe this and sort of edit out the administration's leader, Donald Trump, but he also now seems to be softening in case he has to back down further. Take a listen to the new language of a president watching this tough battle.
Well, I'm not involved in it. I'm going to respond by saying you'll have to speak to the lawyers, the DOJ. I've heard many things about him, and we'll have to find out what the truth is.
Yes, we will have to find out what the truth is. That is not the sound, though, of a president or a politician doubling down on some fight that he thinks is going well and confident that he'll win and spiking the football. That is someone who now wants to at least lay down a marker that he's not involved and talk to the lawyers, and this is somebody else's idea. Fact check, the president is involved, and the DOJ is arguing his cases, some of which are so extreme on these immigration matters that they have had to oust different lawyers. They ousted the lawyer Erez Raveni, who didn't argue exactly the extremes that they wanted. So we know that's coming from Donald Trump's policies. He is involved. But now he wants to say, and maybe it's an olive branch in his mind to the Supreme Court to say, there's a way out of this. A Reagan appointee and appeals court judge has warned that the president now risks lawlessness, the perception that that's what he is running at the dawn within the first 100 days of this administration. The courts also have raised concerns about all of this and whether due process will be upheld or not, and that means the Supreme Court may have to do more. We're also learning, and I mentioned this moments ago, and now I'm going to show you what happens when we get U.S. citizens ensnared in policies that the Trump administration claims are only for migrants or gang members, and yet if they don't afford due process, we have no way to confirm any of that. This is a U.S. citizen, American-born. Reports from The Guardian that they were then detained by ICE in Florida under a state federal coordinated effort because they were allegedly falsely accused by the Trump administration of being here illegally. Again, in court, this individual provided reportedly a birth certificate for proof and a social security number. Guardian reports that we haven't independently confirmed it. This is a 20-year-old detained now for 2 days before being released. So 48 hours in prison as an American citizen for something that apparently, according to The Guardian, wasn't true. A state prosecutor claimed the court didn't have jurisdiction over release because the federal authorities, that's Trump's officials, wanted him detained. Now, under public pressure and this reporting, we can show you he's been reunited with his mother after Thursday release. And you can just imagine this is, and I say this quite literally, this is Trump's America, an American citizen snatched up for 2 days, despite a court hearing where a birth certificate showing citizenship was offered, and re-embracing their parent, thankful that they weren't further sent to a foreign prison like others when there have been these mistakes. You cannot have a constitutional democracy if one politician, one president, can do these type of things without due process, flout the rule of law, and very materially take, imprison, and banish human beings. So we really are in it right now. The emergency hearing now on one of these cases 2 minutes away. And we have two excellent lawyers to go through it when we're back in our special coverage right after this.
This case is not just about one man. It's about protecting the constitutional rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America.
Senator Van Hollen speaking after returning from El Salvador. We're joined by NYU law professor Melissa Murray and a former prosecutor, U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade, both analysts with us. I'm going to ask you to each take a different side of how this is going within what you ever genuinely believe. But Professor Murray, I'd like to start with you telling us what's wrong, because some things seem to not be working, at least with all due haste, to carry out what the Supreme Court basically said in 9-0, facilitate the return. And then when we get to you, Barbara, I'd be interested in what you think is working, because as I mentioned in the reporting, there has been some backtracking and there seem to be some concerns within the Trump administration about whether they want to actually tempt or defy the Supreme Court into pushing them further or tying their hands. The president clearly not on offense when he says I don't even know what these folks are doing. And so it is a complex story. Both things can be partly true. But Professor Murray, let's start with you. What isn't working here when we see this individual mired in a foreign prison? And the rather alarming case I just showed, even if it was, quote, only 2 days, the administration would say, of an American citizen being apparently wrongly held.
So the Supreme Court, Ari, I think, has made its bed, and it may have done so tactically, perhaps anticipating that this administration would drag its heels in actually doing what the court ordered. And so it framed its order to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia. And, the devil is in the details. What does it mean to facilitate something? And there's obviously a lot of wiggle room, according to this administration, and what that requires. But I don't think this administration can play in the court's face indefinitely. And we saw today, for example, on X, the administration seemed to be completely defiant. He's never coming back, they wrote. And, they mocked the New York Times headline saying that Senator Van Hollen had been down there and had spoken to him and that they were taking steps to return him. I think those sorts of things go to the question of what exactly is this administration doing. The fact that they are crowing about it on social media, that they are not planning to return him, that they're not taking any steps, looks like outward defiance. We've already seen Judge Boasberg in a different case talk about the possibility of criminal contempt and lay out exactly how that might happen. We've also seen Judge Zinnes in the District of Maryland, who is the presiding district court judge in this case, saying similar things, that she does not have limitless patience, and that at some point this administration is going to have to answer her questions, or she too will take steps. And I think that's basically where we're going. This is going to be a showdown between this administration and the judiciary.
Barbara, the other side of it, what is working in your view?
Well, I've actually been encouraged by the strength of the courts. Donald Trump clearly came into this term of his presidency with an effort to expand presidential power, to push the limits of Article 2, to say that he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, that the executive power is vested in him, and he was going to use as expansive a definition as he possibly could. But we are seeing the courts respond to that and hold the line. You laid out very beautifully, Ari, earlier, why due process is so important. And so much of the debate that the Trump administration has been pushing is that the people we're talking about are criminals or undocumented immigrants or gang members, but it doesn't matter. Any resident in this country, as you said, any human who is found in this country is entitled to due process. It's not about the substance of who these people are. It is about the process, and that is enshrined in our Constitution. Everybody gets notice and a hearing. That's what due process means. And these people are being whisked out of the country without that due process, without those hearings. That's why a mistake was made with regard to Mr. Abrego Garcia. But the courts are standing strong between Judge Boasberg with this contempt investigation that Melissa just mentioned, Judge Zinnes in Maryland, who has demanded now documents and depositions, and the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. You mentioned this earlier, Ari, a Reagan appointee, Judge Wilkinson, who said this action by the administration should shock not just judges, but every American. And so I'm very proud to see the courts holding strong here. And it's not a political issue. It is about the law and due process, a right enshrined in our Constitution.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll read more from that ruling because you can really see the stakes. As you mentioned, a Reagan appointee, a longtime conservative jurist, and it's not alarmist, and it's not coming from some wider partisan skepticism of Donald Trump's economic agenda or what he said about social issues, abortion. It's not this thing where everyone tries to dismiss everything as a political unfairness. It's clearly on the exact constitutional issue you mentioned. Reading from that Reagan appointee's ruling, if today the president claims the right to deport without due process, then tomorrow, he writes, how could we trust it will not, quote, deport American citizens? And the executive, that's Trump, will not, quote, train broad powers upon its political enemies. Professor Murray, that would seem to be a rational concern if they're doing this in the first 90 days and he didn't leave office peacefully last time and he pardoned violent, convicted seditionists who tried to overthrow the government. It seems that the Reagan appointee is rightly worried that these powers, if not stopped up front, could be used in worse ways, could be used in the run-up or after a contested election. And by then, it might literally be quite too late for the Supreme Court to physically stop it.
Well, I'll say even more than that, Ari. We can laud Judge Wilkinson for stating the obvious here. I mean, this is so clear that even an 80-year-old Republican appointee can see what is wrong with what this administration is doing. But he's not the first person to say this. We had a few weeks ago Judge Patricia Millett in the District of Columbia Circuit saying the exact same thing with regard to the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act and offering those migrants no opportunity to establish that they weren't actually members of the Tren de Aragua gang. And as she said, you actually gave Nazis more rights back in the 1940s than you're giving these individuals now. And what's to say you can't pick me up on the street? That's exactly what she said in that hearing. What's to say you can't pick up an American citizen and do the same thing to that person? Justice Sotomayor reiterated the same thing. So we now have 3 jurists of differing ideological stripes saying the exact same thing. We are moving dangerously close to the point at which American citizens should be alarmed that it's not just about these migrants, it's about an entire system of the rule of law that impacts everyone, including those who were born in this country and those who are naturalized as citizens. And if you want to make it even scarier, the real threat, I think, in Judge Wilkinson's statement is that this administration is willing to use whatever is at its disposal, including emergency powers like the Insurrection Act, which would allow it to take greater steps to use the military for domestic peacekeeping civilian operations. And when we do that, then we're actually living in a genuine police state.
Really harrowing points, rooted in facts and the evidence from both of our lawyers here as this hearing is now officially underway, a few minutes into it. Melissa Murray, Barbara McQuade, thanks to both of you. I'm going to fit in a break, but we have a lot coming up in the program. We're going to look back into how these safety and regulation slashes, a story I've told you we're going to stay on, are now hitting baby formula and affecting the safety of children and infants in the United States, and why that fits into a pro-business but anti-safety agenda. And by the end of the hour, we're going to take a look at this drug war in a chaotic period in American history and what can be done. Many things have changed in American government and politics, you probably noticed, but for some reason, the 100 days thing really sticks. Historically, it has been a period that creates its own reality because Congress and a lot of other elite forces tend to want to get things done in the 100 days, especially when there's one-party control. And so as we're approaching 100 days, you're going to hear more about it. So let's get into the facts on Trump's 100 days as he approaches 90 into this weekend. He's actually signed fewer bills into law than other presidents in this critical period, going back 70 years. Remember, that includes presidents who had to work with the opposing party of Congress, but still found ways to get stuff done. There's just been about 5 minor laws, no major legislation from Trump, nothing big on, say, rewiring the economy or bringing manufacturing home or major social issues. Indeed, everything that he says is a priority, he's trying to do through executive power, having apparently learned in the first term that he just prefers it that way, regardless of the consequences. And that has led to another part of these first 100 days as we get close to them. Administration facing more setbacks, more blockages, more pauses than most modern administrations, including even Trump's first term. They have ran into these walls about 90 times. Trump has also tanked the markets with a tariff war that his own allies and business advisors said was foreseeably bad, and it was. If you look here at the comparisons with the top 500 companies, Trump's second term is just terrible. That's that lower red line. Trump's approval numbers also underwater. He did win the election. We've covered that. But that doesn't mean that after 4 years of a pause, people are liking what they're seeing in the first 90 days. Indeed, approval at 44, disapproval higher, economic disapproval highest ever for Trump. So Americans voted, but are they getting what they wanted, especially after all the talk about a better economy and cutting prices? Longtime Republican Karl Rove says there is now official Trump fatigue, and writing in Fox News' sister publication, The Wall Street Journal. He says the White House throws its weight behind new issues that went entirely unmentioned during the campaign: rename the Gulf of Mexico, acquire Greenland, take back Panama Canal, make Canada the 51st state. This is Rovian sort of sarcasm in print. And he writes, Americans find themselves asking, where did that come from? So take a look at some of the current cuts over at the health department. They want to slash $40 billion to eliminate programs that deal with Americans' public health challenges, like support for, programs for, and research into addressing autism, teen pregnancy, lead poisoning, and one we've heard about a lot of red states and that J.D. Vance used to talk a lot about, solutions for opioid addiction recovery, according to the New York Times account, and RFK Jr. slashing programs that just try to keep your food safe, ending food safety inspections, which are routine and pretty hard to understand why you wouldn't want that. They're halting food lab quality checks and trying to destroy something that nobody ever thought to really attack: the nonpartisan Food and Drug Administration's baby formula research. We don't have a lot of polling on that over the years because everybody wants safe baby formula. So I don't have a poll, not a reputable national one anywhere, where they say, hey, do you want lower prices? Yes or no? Do you want baby formula to be more dangerous? Yeah, people don't cast a vote for more dangerous baby formula. As you know, if you watch this program, I try to follow the evidence and the facts. We don't do a lot of sarcasm, but how else could you face a story about RFK Jr. rolling up his sleeves to get rid of all that baby formula safety work? Well, we have two guests who aren't known for their full-time sarcasm, but can end the week with a little expertise and a little bonhomie when we're back in 90 seconds. We're joined by Dr. Zeke Emanuel, who served as Obama White House Health Policy Advisor and as Vice Provost at the University of Pennsylvania, and Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank, who has a new piece on the historic failure of Trump's impending 100-day mark in office. Welcome to you both. Dr. Emanuel, you and I have talked over the years, including during COVID, about how there were sometimes tough trade-offs. When you talk about working people and policy, you talk about how do you encourage the vaccine, or do you have a government set of requirements that alienate people from it because they feel overly pushed? What I at the time called hard questions, regardless of what my social media mention feed said. And yet what I just walked through, and you can get into the details for the viewers, aren't hard questions, it would seem. They are baseline safety measures for children, infants, et cetera, at the FDA that the Trump administration, RFK, wants to eliminate.
They're taking us back to 1905, just before we established the FDA in this country, to make sure that food would be unadulterated. Remember Upton Sinclair's great book, The Jungle, that showed that rotten meat and rats were being processed and then sold to Americans? That horrified everyone, and they passed the FDA. But we're going right back to that because they're undermining the labs that assess infant formula to make sure they don't have heavy metals like cadmium and lead. But that's true for the whole food supply, not just infants. And so we're going to have a food supply that is much less verified, that we can't be so confident doesn't have real adulteration and poisons in them that are going to affect people. I'm afraid that this could lead to not only people getting sick, that happens pretty regularly from some foodborne illnesses, but actually people dying because we just haven't inspected our food properly. And that's the real threat here, that we're going to purge and we're going to leave all Americans under a cloud of, is this food safe or not?
Dana, you've been writing about the 100-day mark. What do you see in your work?
Well, it's not pretty. I mean, Ari, he does have, 11 or 12 days to turn things around, but we don't seem to be on that trajectory. So I just tried to break it down You mentioned he's been quite a legislative failure. 5 bills passed. I think it's more than 7 decades. I went all the way back to Herbert Hoover for a president, a new president, in terms of his legislative accomplishments. We know what the economic ones have been. We just listened to Jay Powell. We've seen the markets swooning. He promised to end wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Well, they're still going strong. He's alienated our friends with the trade war, splintering apart NATO, antagonizing Canada for no good reason. He's emboldened China, going after Taiwan more, taking advantage of the vacuum he's created. He's been a constitutional failure, as you point out, night after night. I think he's been shot down 80 times in temporary restraining orders by judges. As you noted, public opinion, he's well underwater. There's been a 16-point negative swing since the inauguration. And I don't even things like where he supposedly had victories, like the border. Okay, well, there are fewer crossings. There were already crossings were already really low. And guess what? He's not actually deporting more people than Biden was. And all of these vaunted cuts, for all the slashing of the FDA, as we're talking about, the whole DOGE savings has gone from 2 trillion to 1 trillion. Now it's 150 billion. And it looks like they're just making up numbers for that, too. So the only thing they seem to have done is caused a great amount of chaos, made people frightened, made people anxious, and have really dismantled government, but for no actual useful purpose.
Well, the problem is it also makes us unsafe.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I mean, it makes us unsafe, right? They fired the experts who keep our nuclear weapon stockpile, and then they said, we have to call them back. They want to fire air traffic controllers. They want to fire the people who monitor the weather and make weather predictions so that they can warn the public. All of these things are threatening the safety of the public, and they're very worrisome. They're so worrisome that you have Republicans like Senator Grassley or Marjorie Taylor Greene getting heckled in red town hall meetings. And this tells you that the American public in less than 90 days is pretty fed up already.
Yeah, and Dana, what do you think of that pushback that the doctor mentions? And as grave as some of these issues are, the complete lack of interest in working with Congress doesn't seem like it's going to magically turn around later when the honeymoon period, such as it is, ends. Are we looking at a kind of post-legislating presidency model?
Well, right. It's not because he's not interested in working with Congress. It's because he can't get anything through Congress. So, okay, we have the budget outline, but now you've got all these House moderates, or what passes for moderates in the Republican Party today, saying, hey, we're not going to support any Medicaid cuts, even though, well, by the way, we just voted for $800 billion worth of Medicaid cuts. So now the entire legislative vehicle, the big, beautiful bill, looks like it's in some trouble. So that's why he's going the executive order route. It's because he can't get things through Congress. And that's why the changes being made, look, they are serious and they'll be long lasting because it'll take a long time to recover from this. I mean, it's not just safety issues. I think we're on our 5th director of the IRS already in 90 days, and they're not going to be able to collect tax revenues. We're looking at major non-compliance. So it's destruction across the board. And that's why it's the retreat to executive orders, because he can't get anything through in the legitimate way. So he has gone in a largely extra legal or illegal way to try to achieve the same things, but they're only temporary achievements, if we can call them achievements.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sobering what you both say as we kind of take stock of this at the end of this week, heading into another week, and then the 100 days. Dr. Emanuel and Dana Milbank, thanks to both of you. I want to tell folks what's coming up. We have a lot to process over this kind of wild week. When we come back, we return to an important story that affects people's lives, the failures of the drug war from Nixon to Trump, but also notes of hope, something special after this. A long week in government and politics, but as Nicole Wallace says, it's Friday, and we're looking at the continuing debates over how to wage a drug war. We've seen steep government cuts that might impact the ways the opioid crisis and other issues are managed. Reuters reports that government drug researchers also sacked. An outreach center which distributed doses of life-saving overdose reversal medication has closed. Just a reminder of all the overhang of our drug problems in America and the way the government's involved. Now, that's the political side with Trump cuts. On the cultural side, there's a new Apple TV show, Dope Thief, that looks at the evolving drug war and these problems in America and the opioid crisis. It stars Brian Tyree Henry, an acclaimed Emmy and Tony-nominated actor. He had that breakout role in the show Atlanta, which is absolutely beloved, and he's taking his first lead role in this Apple show, Dope Thief.
I want to see those hands. Yo, just breathe, all right? Think of this like a fire drill that they teach you in school. Oh, look at this. Yo, why the Magic School Bus so heavily armed, huh? Is Frizzle packing? Serious lemonade stand, man. And instead of selling pop rock, he's selling crack rock.
Joining us now is Brian Tyree Henry, star of Dope Thief. Welcome.
Thank you, Ari. What's up?
Happy to have you, man.
Thanks, man.
Tell me about this story.
Well, this story of Dope Thief follows two best friends, Ray and Manny is played by the wonderful, impeccable human being, Wagner Moura, who are ex-cons who come up with a heist to pose as DEA agents and rob trap houses, and their little heist goes wrong when they rob the wrong trap house, which uncovers, you know, this hidden cartel within law and different other cartels that want all their goods back, so they're chasing us through the streets of Philly. Hopefully we make it to the end, but I'm not going to give that away.
And do you feel anything different about having such a big role in a big piece here?
Well, I treat every character the same. I don't ever think of anything as a small role.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like if I did, then I would shrink in a corner and cry. But with this, Ray being front and center and having the show kind of anchored on him was something I'd wanted for a long time. Like I knew that at some point I wanted to be a leading actor. You know, I think every actor wants that. And to also be an EP was just the greatest thing in the world because it gave me a chance to put my hand in the stew, you know.
You were with Kerry Washington, Pennsylvania, and you were campaigning. Why was that important to you to do?
Oh my God, it's the most important thing I could, because I didn't want to look back in history and be like I didn't do all I could. Period. I don't ever want to be on the wrong side of history. And so you know, when my friend asked me to be there for that, I answered the call without a doubt. Like, I just wanted to make sure that I could look back and say I did everything I could.
So let's take a look at Atlanta, which a lot of people remember, where you have Donald Glover, a writer, actor, artist, rapper.
Multi-hyphenate.
So many hyphens.
Mm-hmm.
And you're cast in this role of the central forward motion is this rapper. And you were pointing out when we sat down that actually, if you look closely, in the world of the show, we learn about him and the people around him and how people react to his rise, but we don't actually hear him rap that much, which was a conscious choice. So let's take a look at a moment of you two.
Manage come from the word man, and that ain't really your lane.
My lane?
Yeah, man, I need Malcolm. You two Martin. You know what they did to him? They killed him.
Didn't they kill Malcolm too?
Well, no, they say that, but ain't nobody seen the body since the funeral.
That's how funerals work.
Tell us about what you were doing in this role and what it means to your whole arc, because it seems like one where a lot more people learn about you.
You know, it's interesting because I don't think initially Atlanta was meant to follow Alfred. I think that it was more under the umbrella of the characters and them just existing within the city. But as the show progressed, you started to follow Alfred's trajectory because his trajectory then affected everyone else around him. There's a lot of similarities between he and I, but also I'm going through the same stuff that Alfred is going through.
More so after the show.
Donald even told me, he was like, people are always going to know you as Paperboy, and you're going to notice like that it's the things are going to be very parallel, and it's true. Like
he saw that in advance.
Oh, he kind of because he knows celebrity quite well, and it's true. Like every day is a scene from Atlanta to me, because the concept of being Black and being a celebrity in this country in itself is truly bizarre.
Final question: Apple, probably a great partner. we're seeing this whole shift,
Tell me
not only in
about it.
art, but in news and really how everybody gets all their
Tell me about it.
material.
Yeah.
Whatever word you want to use, art, content,
Yeah.
information.
Sure.
So how do you feel, final question, about working with such a big player in this space
Yeah.
to do something that I think we would all agree 10, 15 years ago would have been on a totally different platform?
Well, I think the way that we are getting our entertainment now is just shifting every month, every year. It's all shifting. But what I am loving about what Apple is doing is how they're opening up their floodgates for new ways to tell stories. You know, I don't think that it's 5 years ago, I could imagine that there would be a show like Dope Thief with my face as the poster on Apple TV. You know what I mean? And so I'm really grateful. Spitzer Wong, who is one of our executive producers, who chose this show, was really adamant about this show existing on this platform, how it had a space and gave us the breath to play and do the things that we did. So for me, it feels great because it feels like they're elevating themselves to do different storytelling and be brave.
That's dope. The show is Dope Thief.
Thank you.
Brian Tyree
Brought
Henry.
it back around. Thank you, Ari.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming in.
Of course, man. Thank you.
Another Friday night legal setback for the Trump administration, a federal judge blocking what had been a new policy that was trying to ban Americans, again, we're talking about things that affect American citizens, from changing the gender on their passport or using X markers, which many non-binary individuals use in the gender section. Doesn't really affect the security of the passport, and the judge saying this exceeds the Trump administration's authority. This was another case brought by the ACLU to basically intervene, a preliminary injunction. They argued the government didn't demonstrate that this move, which they argued targeted people, was substantially related to a government interest. In other words, was there an actual legitimate goal here, like international patrolling or safety, or was it designed to target people? That does it for us. I wish you a great weekend. I'll be back with you Monday evening.